Welcome everybody to today's webinar, conjunction between the Aged Care Industry Information Technology Council and the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council, looking at international partnership opportunities to enhance innovation and technology for aged and community care. So again, everyone, welcome today. My name is George Margellis. I am the independent chair of the Aged Care Industry Information Technology Council. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today to our joint webinar between the Aged Care Industry Information Technology Council and the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council, specifically looking at international partnership opportunities to enhance innovation and technology for aged and community care. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet. I'm based in Sydney, so I'm sitting on Gadigal land, and both councils acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianships of the lands upon which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connection to country, and we recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So just a brief introduction to the Aged Care Industry Information Technology Council. Many of you who would have been familiar with our work over the last couple of decades, formally established in 2007, but was around for quite a few years before that as the Aged Care IT Roadshow Group. And our focus is on harnessing innovation technology to help create a sustainable and high quality aged and community care sector in Australia. And we do this in three ways: by promoting analysis of the sector, by evidence-based research, by researching it in detail, and focusing on improved outcomes for both recipients and for those providing care. Over the last year, we have been very busy. We've produced 5 reports that have been available via our website, looking at the digital maturity of the aged and community care sector, which has been a very important report, focusing on the fact that as we digitize our sector, the requirement for our sector to increase its digital maturity. We have our residential care clinical care systems review, which looks at the current status of aged care systems used in residential aged care, and provide a number of recommendations around how that can be improved to enable us to deliver better care. We've been working diligently with the University of Queensland Centre for Health Research Services to look at the concept of data standardization, so that in aged care we can capture data once and use it many times in an effective and safe way. We've done a lot of work with the Australian Digital Health Agency, focusing in on the use of My Health Record in aged care, including the development of guidelines for residential aged care. And the new version of these guidelines will be available to you very shortly. And finally, our ever popular Innovation and Technology Across Care, or ACIITC conference, as has been known, whilst it was in abeyance this year because of some logistical issues, is back with the inventions in the new year, 26th and 27th of March on the Gold Coast, and more information will be made available shortly. If you have any inquiries about that event, feel free to email us at ACIITC@aciitc.com.au. So today we're looking at a number of issues. We're looking at obviously the challenges facing us globally around the delivery of safe, high quality, effective aged care services. We're looking at how Australia and other countries can work together to develop common systems around the world, taking advantage of innovations both here and around the world to ensure that aged care recipients in Australia and those of us getting into that age part of our lives have access to new technologies which will enable us to deliver the care we require. And finally, we're focusing very much today on our relationship with the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council, who I had the pleasure to meet a few months ago at a forum in Sydney where they were discussing their innovations being demonstrated in Hong Kong at their annual Health and Technology Conference. And we will be discussing that in more detail as we go forward. So first of all, I'd like to start by inviting Bonnie Sheck, the Director of Australia and New Zealand for the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council, to tell us a little bit about Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area and the opportunities we have for collaboration between Australia and Hong Kong. Over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, George. Hi, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to talk about the opportunities in Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area. Very briefly, our organization, the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, we are a quasi-government organization. with the role to facilitate bilateral trade and investment between Hong Kong and the other economies. And the senior office here, we look after both Australia and New Zealand market. And we offer a range of services. In my role, I work closely with the federal and state government agencies, industry associations, or companies, whether they want to sell, source, or to find business partner or investors in Hong Kong. Now, I can assure you that there is very strong interest in for the Hong Kong companies to get into partnership with Australian companies here and also invest in Australia. So to start with, in terms of the Greater Bay Area, it is a cluster of 11 cities in the southern part of China, including Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, as you can see on the slide. It is a very sort of a huge potential market because it has got population of over 60 million and the GDP is higher than that of Australia. Very strong growth and a strong focus on innovation and technology. And it has got the manufacturing capabilities as well. Now, the Hong Kong not only sort of helps companies to get into the mainland market, but also to help companies to get into the other Asian markets as well, because Hong Kong businesses and have been operating there for many years, and many of these markets, the companies, they also have been operating in Hong Kong. So there is very strong linkage, and that's why very often Hong Kong is called the super connector. In terms of the fundamentals, very strong in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the only city in China that practices the common law. And there is free flow of information and the tax regime, very simple, very straightforward. You will be glad to know that for the profit that you make, only those that profit made in Hong Kong will be under the Hong Kong tax. And the first 2 million Hong Kong dollars, which is roughly 400,000 Australian dollars, the tax rate is only 8.25%. And anything above that is only 16.5% tax rate. And the salary tax is only 15%. Now, in the last few years, the Hong Kong government have put in a lot of resources to develop these new sectors. So we have seen very strong growth of companies in these sectors, innovation and tech, covering fintech, AI, robotics, medical and healthcare, sustainability, and creative. Now, in the interest of time, I will briefly talk about the medical and healthcare sector opportunities. There are very strong world-class research and development capabilities and partnerships that are formed in Hong Kong. In actual fact, the universities in Hong Kong have been running a number of programs, partnerships with the universities here. And as the international financial center, Hong Kong also serves as a fundraising platform for overseas companies. Indeed, Hong Kong is Asia Pacific's largest and the world's second largest IPO and fundraising hub for biotech companies. And back in 2018, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has implemented a new listing regime, allowing pre-revenue companies, biotech companies, to be listed. And there are quite a number of companies to take advantage of the changes. And those listed companies are not just biotech, but also from like the medical device, medical services, contract research organization, contract manufacturing organization, digital health, a whole range. In order to provide a platform to bring together the government, business, community, industry players to come together to explore the business opportunities, we have been organizing the Asia Summer on Global Health. The next one, it is an annual conference, and the next one will be on the 16th and 17th of May. It is co-organized by the Hong Kong SAR government, and our organization, HKDDC. Now, this year, the summit, we welcome over 90 international speakers and 2,500 participants from around the world to join us at the summit. There is a very strong business element within the summit. The deal-making section, we've seen over 300 meetings, one-on-one meetings, business meetings being conducted, and between the investors and the project owners. And also, there is a session that caters for a startup and InnoHealth Showcase, as well as some pitching opportunities. Now, I'm very glad to say that the Australian Health Tech Mission that attended our summit this May, they were very, very happy, and then very positive feedback has been received, and they are already planning to go to Hong Kong to the summit next May. So to conclude, these are my contact details. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but if I can be of any assistance, feel free to reach out to me, and then we can have a follow-up meeting. Thank you, George, back to you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for that information. I first met Bonnie at a function in Sydney post that event, and one of the companies that has been very active in aged care, Sleep Tight, was there, and they described in glowing terms the effect of attending that conference. So it's something that we as the council, it gets a bit confusing here, we have two councils, but the Aged Care Technology Council will be looking at maybe supporting a group of Australians to go over and visit next year, so we can share learnings across the world. So now I'd like to invite Ross Dello from RV Automation Tech and Lee Martin from Tanunda Lutheran to join us on stage for a panel discussion. And today's focus is going to be looking at the role of robotics in aged care. So robots, many of you would remember the good old George Jetson and Rosie the robot, and how she was an active part of the household. Well, robots are playing a much larger role in aged care delivery now, as we all face the same challenges we all know about with regard to workforce and skills shortages, and just the mere fact of getting people to work in the sector. And then also the issues around the requirements for lifting and for moving heavy objects. So today we're going to look at how robotics can be utilized in aged care. We have an example of a site, Tanunda Lutheran, which I had the pleasure to visit last week after attending the ACPA conference in Adelaide, where robots have been used for a couple of years in a very innovative way in an area which probably most of us wouldn't think that the middle of Barossa Valley would be the place where innovation would be flourishing. But my experience there was that the use of robots there has improved the quality and safety of care in that facility, and also provided new opportunities. So the two gentlemen, I'll let them both introduce themselves shortly, but I'll start off with Lee. Lee Martin, and many of you will know Lee Martin for his role on the ACPA board, and he's been a very actively engaged member of the aged care community for a number of years. But Lee, if you can start off telling us a little bit about yourself and what your service at Tanunda looks like.
Thank you, George, and it's certainly a pleasure to be presenting to you all today. Look, I've been in the industry now for well over 20 years. I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer of Tanunda Lutheran Home, that's situated in the beautiful Barossa Valley in South Australia. Our facility is a 120-bed facility. It's a very large facility. It's almost a kilometre from one end to the other. And so my staff do, in actual fact, get worn out just by walking around the facility. My interest in robotics came along the lines of what George has already sort of suggested in the way that it's about efficiency and looking after staff. I'm happy to go on, George, but I'll hand over to Ross.
Right, Ross, if you'd like to briefly introduce yourself and how you got involved in this discussion.
Yeah, so I work for RV Automation Technology. So they're a Hong Kong-based organization that specializes in people-centric robotic applications, founded in 2015. So in the last 2 years, they set up operations in Australia and in Adelaide, of all places here. So I, through mutual contacts, got involved with this organisation in the last 2 years. Prior to that, I've been in various roles that related to innovative solutions and looking at business challenges and how you can apply those. So the robotics is no different to that. You look at a business challenge and how that technology can be applied.
Fantastic. Thank you. So like so I had the opportunity to visit Tanunda Lutheran, and as Lee pointed out, it is quite a large facility set over a large block of land with some long corridors and some 120 people, and from what I understand, a full house, a full complement. What made you first think about using robots in that space? I mean, it wouldn't be something that would come back to mind back in the days prior to COVID. We were more worried about just getting workforce. What made you think about robots, and what was the process around getting board approval and staff approval around those robots in your facilities, Lee?
So about 5 years ago, I was attending an ACPA conference in Adelaide, and there were robots actually being displayed there. And once I started talking to the salespeople, I sort of straight away said, well, I want that technology. I need that technology. And so as a result of that discussion, we then really did some data collection. And we actually established that my staff were walking or pulling trolleys around our facility about 9,000 kilometres a year. And as a result of that, sort of sustaining all sorts of injuries, be it elbow, shoulder, back, neck injuries. Plus the fact it was so inefficient, as in when there's someone pushing or pulling a trolley from A to B, it means that they're not available for their residents. And as we all know, workforce since COVID has just got worse, and it really comes down to, from some of the research that I've done, I've established that robots can do 25% of what a human can do. I'm still trying to find out exactly what that 25% is. But at Tanunda Lutheran Home, we have about 10 robots of various sorts. So we have the back of house type robots that are lifting and carrying various types of trolleys. We have cleaning robots that clean the floor and carpets. I have window washing robots cleaning inside and outside of windows. I have comfort robots that assist residents and assist particularly dementia residents to de-stress and so on. And working with Ross Dello from RV Technology, between Ross and I, we have developed an MOU where Ross and I are assisting each other in the future development of robots, specifically in the aged care space.
Excellent. Well, I mean, first of all, you demonstrate there how important it is to attend conferences and events where we actually get a chance to see new ideas, because often we can be tied down in our own facilities and not know what's happening. So the fact that you saw the robots first at what would have been an ACIITC event in Adelaide, and then discussions with the vendors got you to the next stage is very exciting. Gives us great impetus to attend the upcoming Hong Kong event so we can actually learn more. Those early robots you got, they obviously were early in the game, early being a very early adopter. Did they have any limitations? And can you tell us about what your experiences was with those early robots and what improvements you've seen in the robots over the years that you've been using them?
So the first robots we gained were Omnicron robots. They're quite a big robot. And as George sort of mentioned, if you can remember back to the George Jensen days, we had Rosie the robot by 2 or 3. The big thing is that it is a large robot. They actually take up quite a bit of room moving down a corridor. So they do tend to stick in the middle of the corridor and then just veer left should someone be coming towards them. Look, the technology, as we have ascertained over the last couple of months in our robots is probably 4 to 5 years old. We are actually currently going through an Essential 8 audit, and we are establishing that the technology in the robots doesn't meet current cyber technology auditing methods. So we are in actual fact going through a process of getting some of the software upgraded. But what has been interesting is that to have these robots move about our facility, our facility is 70 years old. So we had to do a lot of retrofitting. So we took out every swinging door and turned them into electric sliding doors. We put technology into the lift, so the robots could go up and down lifts. But dare I say it, our biggest issue was Wi-Fi. And we've done a lot of work in the Wi-Fi. We now have the strongest, latest, greatest Wi-Fi. We can produce 5-strength Wi-Fi. We can click a switch and go up to the strength 6. But the trouble is it's actually too high for the robots. And so we actually have to turn down our Wi-Fi to meet the robots. So then I introduced robots from RV Technology, and their technology is far exceeding our initial robots. And so now we're working through the processes of using some of Ross's extra software to be able to deal with all types of robots rather than having individual robots doing their individual scheduling and so on. So I'll let Ross discuss more his ARC process. But look, our residents and staff love our robots. They talk to the robots. They treat the robots as part of the family. They recognize the characters of the robots. Some of our robots are a little bit more efficient than others, but they all know that the robots are doing work that normally would be done by a human, but because they're doing the work, the humans can do the face-to-face, human-to-human touch stuff. So we're not replacing staff. The robots are in actual fact assisting the staff to stay safe and be more efficient with their residents.
Excellent, thank you. So, I mean, I think that highlights a number of issues. Obviously, that your robots can't be installed in isolation. Your IT team needs to be involved early on in those discussions to work out how those robots can use the existing technology. And you know, I'm sure there's scope there for yet another webinar. The requirements around Wi-Fi as our facilities grow and as we use it more and more, not just for robots, but for our clinical information systems, for our entertainment systems. We have to explore that. So your IT team becomes a much more important and much more integral part of your organization, which has its challenges, but also has its benefits. And that's what we're here at the council for, to help support the use of that technology in residential and community aged care. So over to you, Ross. I mean, we heard this, and it was just pointed out to me by my colleagues that the conference you attended in Adelaide, where you first saw the robots, Lee, was an ITAC conference that we held in Adelaide. That would have been when we had the robots, and if memory serves me correct, the robots were also serving the hors d'oeuvres and drinks at that event. So it was a very exciting event. So back over to you, Ross. We've heard about the evolution of these robots. I mean,
that's a really good point that Lee touched on. So I suppose moving from guided vehicles, which kind of required QR codes or straight line navigation to be able to get to its destination, weren't able to move around still and moving obstacles. And that's where the evolution of the technology has gone to autonomous mobile vehicles. So you have a robot that's able to operate within a facility environment, understands its environment. The advancements in the mapping has also come a long way, but the robots are now able to safely navigate that facility and travel around moving and still obstacles like people. Also in the technology is the localized mapping. So we're going back a number of years ago, that was done remotely. So where if you have some gaps in your Wi-Fi, the robots might actually identify themselves in a location, and then when it drops out, they lose where they are and they get confused. On-board mapping is where they are today. So if your Wi-Fi does have a dropout or have a little gap, they still know where they are. They can still function and continue their operations. One thing that Lee talked about was having multiple robots, different types and brands of robots. You've got cleaning robots, service robots. A really important thing is as robots do become commonplace across the industries, especially in healthcare and other sectors as well, having an ability to centralize the management and control and the ability to service those robots is going to be critical to operations. So RV Automation not only is developed our own hardware, but we've also a software developer, and we've developed ARCS. So ARCS is agnostic robotic control software. So it enables you to integrate the robots into different enterprise systems, facility infrastructure like lifts and auto door, and you do that once. And then the different types and brands of robots are able then to be integrated into that centralized platform. What that also enables is robot-robot collaboration between different brands. So one robot might be set with a task that when it sees a certain action or need, it sets another robot to go take that task. For example, a robot might see a mess on the floor and automatically calls a cleaning robot to go clean it. So that's where that's going to be critical in the future for the management of robots in facilities.
Actually, so actually getting the robots not just collaborate with the staff, but collaborate amongst themselves across the various brands and types of robots. Because I guess one of the key things, and as Lee pointed out, he has a number of different types of robots. There is not yet one robot does it all. So there's a specialized tasks are assigned to these robots. The communication between them is critical. Where have you seen that evolution of those specialized robots? I mean, I saw Lee's original robots that were large and chunky and taking up a large piece of space. The new RV ones are much smaller. What other sort of types of robots have evolved or are available through RV Automation that people can be thinking about to use?
Yeah, so the robots are out there. So there's a number of other applications. So we've also got the autonomous mobility chair. So that's a chair which fundamentally is a robot, but it's a chair that helps an individual be transported from one location of a facility to another. So for example, you may have a resident that gets supported by a carer into a chair. The chair is integrated into the facility. They hit one button on the chair, and it might be to take it to the lounge room or to the local hairdresser, whatever it is. And then there'll be someone integrated also with the nurse call system. So the carer at the receiving end of that resident also knows when they're arriving to support them out of the chair. And what that takes away is the need for carers to be pushing, again, people around a facility. If you do want to maintain that human-human contact, though, because that does come up, these chairs have the ability to have a follow-me mode. So you can have one carer supporting up to 4 chairs in a follow-me mode. So you can have one supporting many versus a one-on-one, and again, without having to push. So that's also been a use case that's been raised with me a number of times.
I guess another very exciting opportunity is because Australian aged care facilities are known for being quite innovative, is developing new processes and new concepts of how we use that technology and then sharing that around the world. So your organization has presence in Hong Kong. Is there presence around in other countries as well? And is there opportunities for us to build a global aged care robotics community that we can foster going forward?
Yeah, so we've got offices in Singapore and also in Europe. Obviously, I've been founded and based in Hong Kong. That's where a lot of our history is and where majority of our workforce sits. But yeah, we do have other locations. But we see Australia as a big opportunity here and New Zealand. I see the market here in the healthcare sector. We're still a few years behind. The adoption challenges are going to come to where maybe other parts of the world, including Asia, are probably a little bit ahead of us there. So there's a bit of learnings we can take from that. But there's a massive opportunity in Australia to support the sector. All having the same problems. We've got a growing population, as everybody knows. And how do we embrace technology to provide a better residential care for these residents long term?
Excellent. And it also answers one of the challenges we face, because attracting people to aged care has been challenging. But when it becomes a 21st century state-of-the-art industry, will be able to attract a whole new set of workforce to it. I was having a chat earlier with Lee about Robotics Australia and some of the work's being done here. And one of my sons is a mechatronic engineer. And again, without opportunities to utilize that technology in Australia, they struggle to find work. So we're looking forward to a reinvigorated sector here in Australia. Lee, we discussed over the drinks at the ACPA conference. You saw yet another robot you wanted to get your hands on, a socializing robot, again coming out of Hong Kong, which was being used to engage with people with dementia. Did you want to comment a little bit briefly about that experience?
Yeah, look, it's a comfort robot. It's again the development of comfort robots for residents. The most common one around at the moment is the Paro Seal, but now coming through Hong Kong, Singapore, Asia, is other types of smaller robots that sort of sit on the table, have a screen where facial recognition can occur, and the good thing about it is that it can actually interact with the resident, and it actually knows through the technology in the little robot, it actually knows the resident. So if the resident, for instance, speaks a different language, then the little comfort robot actually picks up what the language is, and through the AI can in actual fact communicate back in the resident's own language. So very innovative, and looking forward to taking that further. And look, there was even another little robot, which was a robot that could feed someone if they couldn't move their arms. And it's just amazing technology and how it's all coming together.
Yep. So look, it's one of the things we like to do at the council through ACIITC is demonstrate some of those. And I remember we had, I think our first robot at ACIITC would have been 7 or 8 years ago with a gentleman out of RMIT who was doing some very early work with robotics. So the use for robots continues to expand. So Ross, from your perspective, obviously, health and aged care is one sector, but your robots are used in many other sectors. Can you tell us about any of the other sectors that use robots and how they use them successfully, and what challenges you've had in other sectors in the adoption of the robots, and whether there's anything we can learn from that in aged care to enable us to speed up our adoption?
Yeah. So I think in Australia, to kind of go back a little bit, one sector that's more advanced and in the adoption of that technology is in the manufacturing warehousing. I think we've been doing that for quite some time. So the typical challenges that they face, which are kind of consistent across all the industries locally, is training of staff, new safety protocols to make sure those things are all taken into consideration, and also the cost of the adoption, making sure that's all taken care of and understood clearly, so you can get that strong ROI to make those business decisions to advance. But the adoption piece, probably for me, across Hong Kong and locally with all the different sectors that we've operated in, is probably been the biggest challenge. So there is that fear factor of people losing jobs, and only time that will eventually become more confidence as people see that they're not losing their jobs, especially in the healthcare sector, that they see that their jobs are more enjoyable, safer. They're able to do maybe what they went to go that job for, which is actually looking after residents, spending more time with people. That'll just take care of itself, and we've seen that overseas. So there are some learnings in that space to be taken from there. However, there is a significant still amount of research I think that needs to be done to really provide the outcomes that the robots in this sector deliver, and that'll help arm the wider adoption of this technology, and that's a critical piece I think that we need to do, and something Lee and I have definitely been talking about.
Look, I think that's a very important point, because as we said, we're very much focused on evidence-based research that demonstrates value, and when we talk about returns on investment, we realize that in aged care, in other sectors, you may get cost savings by taking eliminating staff. In aged care, we have such a staff shortage that all hands on deck still won't enable us to deliver the services. So doing some research to demonstrate, and I think Lee's touched on it, about that 25% of human functionality can be replaced by robots, which need to define that. One thing you may have been taken off from Lee, and I learned this when I met his robots last week, is by socializing the robots, by making them part of the team. And I know in Lee's case, you might want to tell us a story about how you actually named your robots so that your organization and your staff and the residents bonded with the robots. Can you tell us a little about that experience, Lee, about how the robots have become part of the team on a first name basis?
Yeah. Look, so part of the implementation plan, and to get residents and staff to not be fearful of the robots. Before the robots arrived, we had lots of pictures around, we had lots of discussions about robots. And then when the robots actually arrived, we had a party. And then we then had a naming competition to come up with some names. And so for the first 3 robots, we came up with Axel, Robbie and Speckle. And then to ensure that they did become part of the family, because we're a Christian organisation, my chaplain, who's a Lutheran pastor, did a naming ceremony with a bit of an Irish slant. And we had some politicians and other local dignitaries join us in on that. And that just really cemented to everybody else that the robots were part of the family. They weren't here taking jobs. They were in actual fact here assisting the residents or assisting the staff, so the staff could spend more time with their residents. My residents and staff talk to the robots all the time, and they really do know their character. And so a very enjoyable experience.
Excellent.
And if I could just add to that, George,
Sure.
and that's really part, and that's what they talk about, the co-design. So the important part is what we're thinking when you're deploying this type of new technology in these new environments, not only for the residents but also for the staff, is that co-design, getting the residents involved in that process, getting the staff involved in that process to make sure they're part of that journey. And I think doing that well provides a much more successful outcome and heightens the chances of or lessens the chances of having a pushback or having some issues with that technology being deployed, and that then also falls into not just the standard ROI that you have, but the SROI, so the social return on investment conversation, which is how the residents and their families feel with the robots, how do the workers feel, less burnout at the end of the day, all those contributing factors that go to that overall picture about the success of robots in an aged care setting.
I think all those factors are critical, but I think Lee touched on it earlier. I mean, occupational health and safety is a major challenge in aged care. I mean, we all know that our work cover costs keep on going up as we have injuries, and often they're caused by manual labor. So, Lee, you touched on the 9,000 kilometers that are traveled by trolleys in your organization. Both of you gentlemen, weight limits. I mean, how much can these robots lift? What do they mean as far as replacing a human who's pushing a heavy trolley with the risk of back injuries and other musculoskeletal injuries? What can these robots do from physically today and where do we see that going in the future?
Yeah, so we've got different robot payloads for different environments and scenarios. So
you're on mute, Ross.
My apologies. Yes. So we've got a few different robots that are able to take care of different payloads. So we've got ones from 100 up to 200 for that kind of medium to low levels, which in an aged care setting actually covers most of those house duties. For any kind of really significant heavier payloads, then we have a 500 and even a 1 ton.
Oh wow! I did note that at Tanunda you had the robots that could actually keep powered the cubicles in place, so for making sure food was refrigerated or heated as it went. So that's part of the things he can do as well. That is obviously much more difficult with manual movements.
Yeah. Look, the main thing with the whole robotic thing and the work health and safety, if we look at the data from our census in Australia during 21-22, there were 14 million workers registered in Australia during that year, and 3.5% of those, nearly 500,000 workers, were actually injured. And the most common causes of their injuries were pushing, pulling, and bending. And so 31% of those people actually needed some sort of compensation. So by using robots, we can actually get rid of that sort of cost. And instead of paying huge insurance premiums, that's where the ROI comes back to afford the robots. And dare I say it, I know I haven't mentioned this previously, but the robots that I bought 4 or 5 years ago were extremely expensive. The robots that I've been buying from RV Technology are affordable, and I mean really affordable. And as Ross says, they've got greater technology with them too. So it's only going to improve.
I think that's one of the common problems of being an early adopter. We buy the big bulky earlier versions, and so then when the new ones come along, we feel envious. But it's exactly right. I mean, again, this is an evolution. I guess one of the other things we need to think about, of course, is that we're focused here on robots that move, but the robots by themselves don't necessarily need to be moving objects. They can actually be doing other functions as well. And if you see how they're used in factories, they're stationary robots doing different things, and also then we start to think about how personal smaller robots may be of use in home care, and that's one of the things we're looking at. So altogether, I mean, there's a bright future here. There's a lot of use for robots. As a workforce, we shouldn't be scared about them taking the jobs, because they're there to support people in delivering their services. The key thing is, of course, is they have to be integrated into our organizations, both from an IT perspective, but as Lee has pointed out, also from a cultural perspective. And we need to think about these co-design solutions. I think there's lots of opportunities there for the Australian aged care providers and companies like RV Tech and others to work together on solutions. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, so I might switch over that. But before we do that, I might ask Georgie to show us a short video of how the robots are currently being used in Tanunda, so people can get a better idea of what these robots are like. So as you can see there, the robots are real. They do what we say they're doing. And the sky's the limit when it comes to us thinking about new ways of using these robots beyond just physical moving, but also using them in other ways around our organizations. And again, the council is keen to help foster the growth of the sector. So we do have a technology roundtable currently in place. After discussions just this afternoon with Lee, we're looking at supporting a stronger move to robotics. So we've got a couple of questions here. Some of them are focused on how can I've got a question here from Rosie Wiley. How can robots be effectively integrated into home aged care to improve the overall quality of life and well-being of elderly individuals? Lee, want to start off? Any ideas how we could use it? I mean, obviously we wouldn't be necessarily having 300 kilogram lifting robots in a home, but how else would we use it?
In actual fact, just today, I had the pleasure of presenting at a disability workforce summit here in Melbourne, and that comment or question was actually raised: how can robots be introduced into a home environment? And the answer is there are certainly robots, particularly through America and Japan, that would quite easily fit into a home environment. It's just that they haven't arrived yet in Australia, and it really just needs for further research and technology in Australia to catch up. It's all there.
Excellent. Yeah, and again, that's where we're an opportunity for Australia to take a leading role in developing processes around. So we don't need to actually build the robots here, although that would be a nice thing going forward. But actually, how we best utilize technology, and I think Australia has been a world leader in demonstrating uses of technology. A question for you, Ross, and around the procurement of these devices. Is there a national sort of supplier framework or standards that people need to know about when they're looking to buy robots? Are there particular ISO standards as they relate to, and are they regulated for use in the public sector facilities?
Yeah, so just to answer the first part there with the standards. So there's no real specific standards. I mean, you've got the kind of standard electrical compliances and emission compliances, but there's not really a specific one that sits just on the robotics to be utilized in a public place. There are auditing companies when you're introducing robots into a facility that are going to be around people. So if you wanted to undertake that type of work, and they will look at the operations, what it's carrying, how it's carrying, the speeds it's carrying out, and they will actually, based on that information and the scheduling, come back with recommendations of how that is deployed. That is something we also do internally anyway, as part of our project delivery.
And I guess one of the kids, because Lee pointed out his facility is 70 years old, so obviously his corridors weren't designed with robots in mind. Are there any design considerations people need to keep in mind when they're with the development of these robots? And again, judging by the new ones, which look a lot smaller and a lot more nimble than the older ones, that won't be as big an issue as what it would have been in the past.
Yeah, so typically when you have an older facility, the doorways aren't quite as wide as maybe the new ones. But it's why we have designed that V3 robot specifically for that use case, so it's able to operate in tighter, more narrow spaces effectively. When you're looking at an existing facility that's got older, obviously there's retrofitting. So as Lee mentioned earlier, we need to kind of assess the navigation paths for the different types of robots and how they need to enter different areas of the facility between multiple floors, and what upgrades and are required to achieve that. When you're doing a new facility, that's where we like to get involved with the design. Get involved with the consultancies who then look at the operations, and they'll come back with their feedback about how different corridors and different areas of that facility are designed to support not just robots, but other types of advancements in technology to support the future.
Yeah. One of the things I learned very early in my career is that old buildings are not designed for Wi-Fi, and that 16 inches of stone is can become a challenge for a Wi-Fi signal. So understanding how that works. Got a question here about: do you think we'll be able to use robots to be counted as care minutes, or do we see it as supplementing workers to enable them to free up care minutes? I guess that's sort of the debate we would have.
I certainly believe that RV technology do actually have a robot that's currently being trialled in Hong Kong and Singapore hospitals in a clinical space. I firmly believe that with an increased use of AI and facial recognition and connection with things like a nurse call system or the clinical systems within aged care services, that the answers it could or should be, but these are some of the questions that we will need to pose as part of research in hopefully the not too distant future to both the minister and the regulators about if we are using robots to support our residents, what does that actually mean for not only care minutes, but also for things like reducing work health and safety insurance, or dare I say, meeting accreditation.
Excellent. I guess one of the key issues, I mean, as I said, when I first met Bonnie, they were demonstrating the use of sensors in the bed. So integrating the rest of that technology. So because as we digitize our facilities, it's not just the robots, but it's also the sensors we use for remote patient monitoring, or the sensors we use for air quality, for temperature, so there's a whole bunch of things we can integrate. And again, that becomes part of the innovation that we can drive here in Australia of how we integrate all that into answer. Obviously, once we start looking at clinical usages, we start talking about regulatory requirements, and we can look at that in a future forum as we start looking at some of the other technologies in healthcare. But TGA regulations will become into place going forward. One final question, we are getting short on time. The social robots, and we talked about those earlier, and yeah, many of us would have seen Pyro, the seal in its early days, and I remember Lee and I were reminiscing how expensive it was and how limited its functionality was compared to what's available now. But with our multicultural communities, being able to deliver information in multiple languages via the social robots, is that something we think is possible, and do you see that as an advantage?
I certainly do see it a real advantage. I think the greatest thing is the use of facial recognition nowadays. We use facial recognition now with our dementia clients in the way of the pain check ability. And so to be able to use these social robots that could be scanning all the residents throughout the day and then scan them the next day with the right AI in it, we may in actual fact find that one of the residents had a stroke overnight. So the technology is there. Through Ross and I, we are working closely with a Professor Ted Ma, who is the leading surgical professor on surgical robotics. And he's working with us in assisting us develop this whole process of the use of AI in a clinical space.
Excellent. I think that's almost gives us a segue to our next webinar. So hopefully in the new year, we'll be able to have a more detailed discussion around AI, which is a key topic. We did host a session of that at the ACPA conference where we had the roundtable around AI, and there's obviously a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we're short of time. I think, thanks for mentioning PainCheck. I think PainCheck is yet another great example of how we can integrate technologies to form a solution. I think it's a real exciting time. Like I said, we will at ACIITC in March, we will be talking about the use of new technologies, including robotics. But for those of you who can get over to Hong Kong in May, I highly recommend that you get that on your calendars for now. And the council is quite happy to work with people to work on developing a program for Australian aged care providers to visit the Hong Kong event. But keep in mind, there will also be some robots discussion and new technologies at the ACIITC conference on the 26th and 27th of March. Our contact details are on screen. I'd really like to thank our three panelists. Thank you very much for your feedback. We've gone through time very quickly, and I think we've all gathered quite a lot of worthwhile information. Feel free to contact myself or the secretariat or executive at the Aged Care Information Industry Information Technology Council. I've been doing this for 5 years and I still can't get that right. And a special thank you to Bonnie Sheck and the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council for introducing us to the innovations coming out of Hong Kong. And I look forward to an ongoing set of forums looking at new innovations coming out of Hong Kong and how Australia and Hong Kong can collaborate going forward. On that note, thank you everyone for attending. The recording will be available. Please feel free to share it with your colleagues. If you have any discussions you would like about what you heard today, we do have an active LinkedIn group, the Aged Care IT Council. And on that note, I wish you all the best for the rest of the day. Thank you.